motorcycles are all about engines to me. I love engines. And we've seen all kinds of engines, 4 cylinders, 2 cylinders, 1 cylinders. But what is really rare is a rotary engine. We know rotaries from Mazdas, and here is a Wankel rotary engine in a Suzuki, a production Suzuki motorcycle, the RE5. And here's its owner, Dan.
Hi.
Dan, tell us why this is a special motorcycle.
Well, in 1973-74, Suzuki decided that they were going to break with tradition and they wanted to look at what the future of motorcycling would be. And they decided to license the technology from NSU company for the Wankel engine. And they spent 2 years developing a rotary engine motorcycle. They produced this bike in 1975, and they had a 1976 model, which this is. Suzuki put a huge amount of money, about $40 million into the development.
40 million?
Yeah, in 1975, that was quite a lot of money.
Wow.
And they wanted to basically just change the landscape of motorcycles. Unfortunately, it didn't work out too well, and this bike was almost the demise of the company when it came out, because it really was not accepted by the public very well.
Only 2-year model run?
2-year model run. In the reality of it, it's basically really a 1-year model run. The original RE5 Suzuki was styled a bit differently than this one. It had very bright orange or blue metal flake paint. It had very unusual cylindrical gauges and globes for turn signals, and it was quite space age looking, or more how would you say, Flash Gordon looking than this bike. The public didn't really accept that design very much, and the dealers had trouble moving them off the floor. And so what Suzuki decided to do is take their remaining inventory that they hadn't sold yet. They returned them to Japan, repainted them like this bike black, changed the instrumentation and the lighting to make it a little more conservative, more appealing to the general public, and then returned those as 76 models. This is one of the bikes that actually was returned to Japan and reworked.
Wow. So not only did they have this weird engine that people had to get used to, they came out with weird styling that made everybody go, what the heck?
Yeah, everybody just stood back. It was a different era in 1975. You know, Honda had just come out with a CB750 in the late 60s, early 70s. Kawasaki had released the Z1 900. Honda had the Goldwing. And people just had a hard time relating to this bike. They looked at the engine, it was just too unusual. The average guy that liked to work on his bike looked at it and go, gee, that doesn't look like something I know how to deal with. And the dealers also had a hard time accepting it because their mechanics had to be specially trained to work on it. And it was just enough different that people just decided to stand back, and they just didn't want to spend the money on something that was, to them, they felt it was unproven and just a little too different.
So it's kind of an oddball, but what's it like to ride?
The reality of it is Suzuki did a great job in the engineering department on this. The bikes are extremely reliable. They're smooth running. They're not a high RPM rotary engine. They're real torquey, easy, real flat power band, and they handle extremely well. A lot of the frame geometry that was developed on the RE5 was later used on the Suzuki GS series bikes too. So they learned a lot from the development of this. They applied to some other models as well. And overall, they're very reliable. My original rotary, I bought a new one in 1975. I was a mechanic and went to the Suzuki school to learn how to work on them in '75, and I put almost 100,000 miles on that bike with no problems with it. Typically these bikes, we see them at 80 to 100,000 miles on them, and they're still going. They're a very solid motorcycle. A rotary, if you ride it easy, is 35, 37 miles a gallon, but if you start pushing it hard, they'll drop into the low 20s, and with a little over 3-gallon gas tank that doesn't have a very good range. So that was another deficiency with them.
You'd mentioned the rotary smoothness. Now, is this the smoothest motorcycle engine you've ever ridden?
I wouldn't say it's the smoothest, but it is as smooth just about as any other 4 or 6-cylinder bike. It doesn't sound smooth because it's got an interesting exhaust note, but the engine is actually rigidly mounted in the frame. There are no rubber mounts to isolate it, and it is quite smooth.
And is it fast?
Not particularly. It wasn't in the same category as a 900 Z1 Kawasaki, but it was designed to be a touring bike. But I believe in 75, 76 when they tested them, they were in the low 13-second quarter-mile times. So it wasn't a total slouch, but again, it wasn't any high-performance bike. Suzuki had intended to evolve the rotary engine, and they actually had a twin rotor Wankel bike that was ready to be produced. They decided to come out with this model first, and then later, a year or so later, introduce a new, bigger, more high performance model. But of course, being with the sagging sales with this bike, and they decided to not move forward with it.
Any idea how many they made?
They made about 6,500, 6,600, right in that range, to the best of my knowledge. We don't really know how many are existing on the road. The dealers had a hard time selling them, and they were a lot of them were dumped on the market at very low prices. And the remaining inventory, even after they reworked the colors that didn't sell, they were returned to Japan and destroyed. So we don't know out of the original production run really how many are on the road right now, are still on the road. I'm guessing probably in the United States there may be 200 or 300 of them, maybe in operating condition. There's probably more than that that are still, stuck away in barns and garages here and there. But as far as actively running motorcycles, there are not very many of them.
All right. So there you go, kids. You think you know something about engines? You know there's rotary engines in some motorcycles, like this 70s Suzuki RE5?